In this chapter, we're going to write our first C# program, and we're going to write the traditional program that everyone writes for their very first program, the Hello World program. So get Visual C# started. Then when you get to the start page, select New Project. We are going to do a console application, so make sure that's highlighted. Then name your project. I'm going to name mine based on where I am in the course chapters, Chapter 3, Part 1, only to keep it straight and make it easy for you to look at the code that comes with this course. So after you've named your project, click OK, and then it will load. And now let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing on your screen. The code editor, or the editor window, contains our program. When you load a new program or when you start a new project, certain lines of the program, or what we call lines of code, have already been added. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail about them yet, and we will over the course of this chapter to some extent, but I do want to mention that these first few lines that begin with using, those lines are bringing in parts of C# that aren't loaded automatically with every program. The main object we need that is brought in with the using system line is the console object. And we need a way to communicate with the computer that's running our program, either the keyboard or the console. Using system allows us to work with objects that are associated with the keyboard and with the screen. And I'll demonstrate how that works in just a moment. The other three are common to many programs: the using system.collections generic, using system.link, and using system.text. They're added in by default. We're not going to use them until much later in the course, but I'm just going to leave them there to make it easier to work with the programs that we have. So after that, on line 6, you notice that each line has a number. On line 6 is a line that says namespace chap 3 part 1. That actually begins our main program, or the one that we're working with here. Then notice that there's an open curly brace. That curly brace represents the body of the program, because there's a matching closing brace that goes with it right here. We'll learn a lot more about when to use opening and closing curly braces, but understand now that most of the main parts of a program are separated into what's called a block. And blocks are started and stopped, or began and ended, with curly braces. Then down below we have a class program. Every program in C# is written as a class. If you've done some Java programming, you understand that concept. If you've worked with Java, then you understand the idea that every program is a class. For now, we're just going to accept that, and later on, we'll explain why. And then finally, we have the static void main, string, open, close, bracket, args. Every class and every program must have a main section. The compiler looks for this line as the place to start compiling a program. And the idea behind compiling a program is that we take the code that we've written, the compiler turns it into machine language, and then that machine language runs the program. Or in this case, the dotNet compiler turns our code into common language code, and that code is run by dotNet. It's very similar to the way Java runs with a Java virtual machine. dotNet runs our programs much the way the JVM runs a Java program. So the main part of your program always has to be listed as static void main, and then the code will go inside those open and closing braces. In fact, that's what we're going to do right now. So we want to write out the phrase hello world. That's the first phrase we always write. So to do that, we first mention the console. The console is the object that represents the screen. Then we're going to write WriteLine. Notice that when we type console dot, a window pops up. This is called IntelliSense. IntelliSense contains those attributes, properties, objects that we can access at any particular time. If I back up, once I type a C here, then IntelliSense tells me what objects are available at this point, and console is one of those. Then when I hit dot, then it brings up another list of objects. It doesn't have to be just objects. It can also be what we call methods or functions, and WriteLine is an example of a method. WriteLine will write its argument, which I'm getting ready to provide right here, to the object that precedes it, in this case the console. So when I write console.WriteLine hello world, I'm saying write the string or the phrase hello world to the console. and also include a new line so that the cursor will begin on the next line. Now, I'm not quite finished. I also need to do one more thing. I need to add another method call, this one to read key, so that the console window that I'm about to bring up when I write hello world to the screen will stay open. And I'll show you what happens when you don't include read key. But this is our hello world program. The main program is one line, console.writeLine hello world, and then we include read key to hold the screen open. To run the program, I come up here to this green arrow, start debugging. I see hello world in this DOS or console window. We'll call it a console window because it will always come up when we send things to the console. Notice how the cursor is blinking on the line underneath hello world. That's because we wrote console.writeLine. If I'd have written console.write, which is another method I could have used, then the cursor would have been blinking after the exclamation point. But I wrote WriteLine, so it moves down to the next line. If I take read key out, we'll just backspace over it, and then run the program, notice that the window came open, displayed hello world, and then closed again. That is why we need console.readKey in our code. And we'll place it at the end of every program that we write mostly, because we need it to keep that console window open so that we can look at the results of what we've written. So that's the hello world program. There's been a lot introduced here, and much of it you don't have to worry about for right now. The key things you need to remember is that we need the line using system so that we have access to the console class or the console object. Our main program is contained in what's called a namespace. Within that namespace, we have a class, which is just always generically called program. Generally leave it at that. We can rename it, but we're not going to. And that every program has a main or a static void main that the compiler looks for as the place to begin compiling the program. So with those ideas in mind, we're ready to wrap this lesson up, and we'll move to the next lesson where we talk about the types of errors that can crop up in your programs.